Okay, hi everyone. I'm going to get us started here. My name is Eleni McGee and I'm a Vista here at the Barbara Bush Houston Literacy Foundation. Thank you all for coming. Just so you know, we are recording. Katherine has generously agreed for those who can't make it. So we ask that you just please stay on mute. There will be a time towards the end for question and answers, and you can either pop those in the chat or use the raise hand feature, and Lisa or Trina will be sure to try to get to your questions. We're so excited to have you all here today. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Lisa Scheinbaum, who is part of the First Ladies Book Club. Thanks, Lisa.
Sure. Well, welcome everybody. And welcome to the Ladies for Literacy Guild First Ladies Book Club. We're so happy you could join us this evening. A heartfelt welcome to one of our favorite authors, Katherine Center, and to each of you for zooming in. The Ladies for Literacy Guild is a dynamic group of women committed to carrying forth Barbara Bush's legacy in literacy and supporting the Barbara Bush Houston Literacy Foundation. The foundation's mission is to improve lives through the power of literacy, the ability to read, write, speak clearly, and think critically. To aid in the advancement of the foundation's mission, the Guild hosts several signature events, so please visit our website to learn more and to join us if you are not already a member or need to renew. Katherine Center just does something to me. Her books are like a balm for my weary soul. Her words just make me joyful. That is a reader review. Our reviewer, her name is Stephanie. And I'll let you know that I've met Katherine several times, and not only are her words joyful, but she is joyful. Best-selling author Katherine Center wrote her first novel in the 6th grade and got hooked. From then on, she was doomed to want to be a writer, obsessively working on poems, essays, and stories, as well as memorizing lyrics and keeping countless journals and reading constantly. She won a creative writing scholarship in high school and then went on to major in creative writing at Vassar College, where she won the Vassar College Fiction Prize. At 22, she won a fellowship to the University of Houston's creative writing program and moved home to Texas with plans to become Jane Austen ASAP. Book Page calls Katherine Center the reigning queen of comfort reads. She's the New York Times bestselling author of 8 books, including How to Walk Away, Things You Save in a Fire, and her newest, Katherine.
Oh, well, my one that's coming out this summer is called The Bodyguard.
Ah, okay. And also, oh, nice that you have it right there.
Yeah.
And what you wish for. Katherine writes laugh and cry books about how life knocks us down and how we get back up. She's been compared to both Jane Austen, so there you go, she got her wish, and Nora Ephron, and the Dallas Morning News calls her stories satisfying in the most soul-nourishing way. And the movie adaptation of Katherine's novel, The Lost Husband, starring Josh Duhamel, very cute, hit #1 on Netflix. And her novel, Happiness for Beginners, this one right here, Happiness for Beginners, is in production now as a Netflix original starring Ellie Kemper. It's adorable. Katherine believes the single most inspiring thing about the human race is the way life knocks us down over and over and over, but we just keep on getting back up. That's why her stories are always about resilience and struggle and finding ways to savor life's moments of grace. USA Today says Katherine Center writes an amazing, heartwarming novels. The Dallas Morning News says reading a book by Katherine Center is like having a long lunch conversation with an old friend you haven't seen in a while. Familiar, cozy, and satisfying in the most soul-nourishing way. And #1 best-selling author Jodi Picoult says of Things You Save in a Fire, just read it and you'll thank me later. Katherine lives in her hometown of Houston, Texas with her husband, 2 kids, and their fluffy but fierce dog. And now it is my pleasure and honor to introduce you all to a most wonderful and joyful author, Katherine Center.
Hey, hi everybody. Oh, I see you clapping. Thank you. So yeah, I'm here, and I think that I'm going to start off just by talking a little bit about like how I got hooked on stories, how I decided that I wanted to become a writer. It's kind of a fun little Cinderella story, and I'll try and do that fairly quickly without too many digressions. And then I'll talk to you about Happiness for Beginners, because I think we're really here to talk about that. And there's a lot going on with that little book right now, which is, I'm so grateful for that, because I love that book. It's just, I don't know, there's something about it that's really special to me. So I'm so happy that it's getting this kind of, it came out in 2015, but now that it's becoming a movie, it's getting this kind of second act. And then I'm happy to answer any questions. I mean, honestly, this is the most fun thing I get to do. So I'll go all night if you guys want me to. I'm just right here. Anything you want to ask me, I'm happy to answer. So, okay. So I wrote my first novel when I was in the 6th grade. I'm from Houston. I went to St. John's school. I was a lifer. And I was very, very awkward in 6th grade and very, very miserable in 6th grade. And I had terrible hair. I basically had like a mullet in the 6th grade, and I had braces and a huge overbite and crisscrossed rubber bands and like a headgear that I had to snap in at the back, and long flat feet like snorkeling flippers, and basically every horrible affliction that you can give to like a 6th grade girl. I had them all. And I knew it, like I knew that I was not crushing it as a 6th grader. And I just didn't know how to fix it. I had a very strong antenna for like people's reactions. And I basically spent that entire year just kind of like hunched over in apologies, just like walking around like, I'm sorry, like I know it's bad. I just don't know how to fix it. And I can tell you it was legitimately bad, because when I was in the 6th grade, my older sister staged an intervention with my mom where she like went to her and she was like, you have got to take her to the mall. She is bringing down the entire family. I mean, that's truly the situation. So luckily for me, that year, I had 2 best friends who were also super awkward and also very miserable. And we all 3 had mad, insane crushes on the 1980s boy band Duran Duran. So we somehow got this idea that we should write novels about meeting the band members, and we should cast ourselves as the main characters in the novels. And so we did. We would like suffer through the school week as only 6th grade girls can suffer. And then on the weekends, we would get together and have sleepovers, and we would bring our little novels with each other, with ourselves together to get together. And we would put on PJs and we would jump in somebody's bed, and we would basically read our novels to each other in installments. And we very politely included each other as secondary characters in our stories. And so for me, it was so much fun. It was so fascinating to hear about what I was up to in my friends' novels, but it was also so fun for me to get to share what I had been writing. So 6th grade was truly misery, but doing those novels was bliss. And just full disclosure, here is what happened in my 6th grade novel. And this novel still exists. It is terrible. My older sister has very explicit instructions that if I'm ever hit by a bus, her #1 activity is to get up to my attic and find that novel and burn it so it never sees the light of day. I'm like, do not go to the funeral, get to the attic, burn the novel. So it's very bad. But it was also kind of genius, because here's what happens. In my 6th grade novel about Duran Duran, Duran Duran is driving through my neighborhood of Afton Oaks in Houston in their stretch limo on their way to a concert when they get a flat tire, as luck would have it, right in front of my house. And this is the 1980s, so there are no cell phones. So they have to find a landline to call a tire guy. So they have to walk up to the closest front door, which just happens to be my front door. And I just happened to be there at the time, watching MTV and busting my dance moves to their Hungry Like the Wolf video. So I hear the bell, I open the door, I see all 5 band members of Duran Duran looking deadly handsome standing on my front stoop. I freak out internally, but I play it cool and I let them in and let them use the phone, and make them microwave popcorn like a gracious hostess. And then I don't know what was going on with the tire guy that day, but he was like super, super busy and could not get to our house in a timely manner. And so we just had to sit in my mom's living room and like make chit chat for a long, long time. And somehow in this one astonishingly magical afternoon, all 5 of them fell in love with me. And that was the plot. That was the whole plot. I had to decide which one to marry. Like, that was it. And my friends had similar plots to their novels. So it is terrible. It's a terrible book. Every time I try to like go back and reread it for nostalgia reasons, like I have a physical visceral, it's like trying to chop onions or something. My eyes just start watering. I'm like, this is terrible. But what was genius about that book was I was kind of sinking in 6th grade. I was kind of floundering. I was having trouble keeping my head above water. I was so mean to myself in 6th grade. I saw nothing but flaws. Like when I looked in the mirror, it was just, all I saw was just a laundry list of everything that was wrong with me and areas for self-improvement, in that way that 6th grade girls do, right? I was so hard on myself and I just really, really, really needed some encouragement. And I really, really needed some hope. And I really, really needed somebody to tell me that I was worthy and lovable and had at least some potential, right? And so somehow, accidentally, I wound up inventing these imaginary versions of these world famous rockers who could say all the sort of kind and encouraging things to me that I refused to say to myself. And it kind of rescued me that year. I mean, it really saved me. And it was sort of my first ever taste of that very, very particular magic that fiction has, right? Because fiction is this very special thing in human life. What's great about fiction and what makes it like nothing else out there is that when you engage in a work of fiction, whether you're binge watching something on Netflix or reading a novel, you know that it's not true. You know it's not true, but you believe it anyway. And that's a really special kind of magic because that means that stories can kind of step on either side of these very rigid categories that we set up for things, right? They can kind of bypass all of our attitudes and prejudices and simplistic ways of thinking about things. All the things we already thought we knew, they just skip over all that and they just go straight to the heart, And one thing that's really amazing about fiction, I mean, basically from that moment on, I was just totally like enamored of fiction and like weirdly obsessed with it. And I wanted to figure out how it worked. And I've basically spent the rest of my life from, 6th grade on studying it, going to grad school, taking English classes, taking writing classes, writing journals. And I've learned a lot of cool things about how it works, what it is, why it's so incredibly powerful. One of the things that I love, one of the things I know about fiction and I love about fiction is that basically you get knowledge in life from reading books and studying things and learning your multiplication tables and memorizing facts and doing all that stuff. But you get wisdom in life from your own life experiences, right? That's where we get wisdom, is the things we've gone through and the lessons that we've learned from those things. And what's amazing about fiction is it's both, you've learned how to read, that's knowledge. And yet when you sign up with an author to go through a story, you get this sort of guided tour of somebody else's life. You get this kind of virtual reality for experiences that you might not ever have had and probably won't ever have. And you get to pull wisdom out of those experiences because in a way, especially if the writer does their job well, you have a kind of simulated experience of going through whatever the people in that story are going through. And so you don't just get knowledge from the story, you can also get wisdom. And that's like a really, really special thing. There's nothing else in human life that can really do that for you. And I couldn't have put any of this into words when I was in the 6th grade, but I sensed it. I sensed there was something really special about fiction, and there was something really magical about fiction. And what I kind of had an inkling of back then that I've carried with me all the way through is that stories can save you. Stories can change your life. Stories can teach you things that you need to learn, and they can tell you things that you need to hear, right? And they're this very fun way of talking to yourself that's also like incredibly powerful. So that's the thing. That's how I got hooked on it all. That's how I got obsessed with it. And after that, I did all the things that you do when you want to be a writer. I memorized song lyrics, and I copied over poems, and I kept journals for 10 solid years. I wrote down every single thing that ever happened to me and journaled like mad. I went to Vassar College, and I was an English major. And I won the Vassar College Fiction Prize, which was, Vassar's a tiny little college, but it's harder to win than you might think, because there are not a lot of math majors at Vassar. Every single person there is writing a novel. So this competition was quite stiff. And then I came back to University of Houston and went to graduate school, got a master's in fiction writing. The University of Houston's graduate school is fantastic. I feel like this is one of our like best kept secrets. It's like the ranked second in the nation for creative writing programs. So it's a really great school. And then I thought I would, okay, I've done my schooling, I'll be a writer, like you graduate from medical school and you go be a doctor, or you get out of law school and you go be a lawyer, except it's not like that with writing. I graduated with my little master's in creative writing, ready to like publish some stuff, and that I could not get published. I mean, it was just this sort of tragic reality that kind of hit me. It's like, being a writer is not a thing that you can just do. You have to kind of try and not give up, and then hope to stumble on some good luck. I mean, basically wanting to be a writer is kind of like wanting to win the lottery. Like, you just don't really have a lot of control over how it's going to happen, when it's going to happen, if it's ever going to happen, and it's really not very likely. So I spent about 8 years after that sending short stories to the New Yorker and getting rejected. That's what I did for about 8 years. And I also taught creative writing to little kids during that time. And I worked in my uncle's bookstore. My uncle had a really fantastic bookstore in Houston called the Dietering Book Gallery. And it was on Bissonnette. And it was in an old house. And it had all these fun Scooby-Doo like features. Like there was one set of bookshelves you could press on them and they would pop open and you could dart through to another part of the store. So a very charming place, and kind of a Houston institution. Michael Jackson came into the bookstore one time. Wes Anderson came into the bookstore, which is not as shocking because he is from Houston. And then Larry McMurtry came into the store when I was working there. And I totally freaked out because Larry McMurtry is my husband's favorite writer. And so I panicked. And I could not bring myself to ask for his autograph. And then Larry McMurtry wrote me a paper check for a big stack of books he was getting, but then he changed his mind at the last minute. So he ripped up the paper check and threw it in the wastebasket and wrote a different check for the other stack. And then after he left, I went to the wastebasket and I pulled all the pieces out and I taped them back together. And then I took them home and I was like, look, I got you Larry McMurtry's autograph, and we still have it. So yeah, I did all those things, all those writerly things, but I also could not get published for a very long time. And it really wasn't until I wrote my first novel that I sort of got published almost by accident. I had written this thing and it was ready, and I was, kind of trying to look for an agent, but I really didn't know how to do it. And it was all very overwhelming. And I was feeling pretty discouraged. And then one day I ran into a woman at the park who was a published novelist. And I was too shy to ask her anything, because if anyone can ever help you in life, you need to get like as far away from that person as possible. So I panicked when I realized who she was and sort of went off and hid behind a tree. But I was with a friend who was not shy, and she just marched right on over there. And she was like, that's my friend Katherine over there. And she's written a novel that's really funny. And I think, don't you want to help her get it published? And this very kind woman did. She passed along my novel to her agent. And her agent wrote back within the hour on email saying that she wanted to see the whole thing. And so then I emailed off this 300-page manuscript to this total stranger. And she wrote back within a week and said, I love your novel and I can sell it. And then the next thing I knew, she had sent this book off to 8 different publishing houses in New York. There were 4 who were interested, and they were all really big publishing houses. So it was like HarperCollins and St. Martin's, which is part of Macmillan, and Random House, and somebody else. I feel bad that I forgot the 4th person. Sorry. But anyway, she got them into an auction, and then she got them into a bidding war. And then the next thing I knew, Random House had won. I mean, we had gotten a 2-book deal with Random House. It was the craziest thing. There I was with my 2 little kids, and I was like in sweatpants, not having a glamorous moment by any means. And I remember that night thinking, wow, my life is never going to be the same. And then I remember being up the next morning at like 5 a.m. with a baby and thinking, you know what, actually, it's going to be exactly the same. Nothing's going to change at all. But anyway, that was the beginning. That was 2006. It's been many, many novels since then. I'm actually, my 9th novel is this one, The Bodyguard, which comes out this summer. And then my 10th one I'm working on right now. So I did 4 books with Random House, and then I moved over to Macmillan. And I've had two stories made into movies. So The Lost Husband was made into a movie that hit #1 on Netflix. It actually hit #1 on Netflix and then got released internationally. It wound up in the top 25 movies for Netflix in the US for the year, but it wound up in the top 10 movies for 2020 in 30 different countries around the world, which is kind of mind-boggling. And now there's Happiness for Beginners is in the process of getting made into a movie. So yeah, there's been a lot of exciting things that have happened along the way. And I don't want to talk too long because I want you guys to be able to ask me questions and stuff. So I'm kind of like doing a Reader's Digest version here at the end of this whole big long story, which honestly, I could take 3 hours to tell you this story. I could still be going tomorrow morning. But I'm happy to answer questions or talk about specific things. We could talk about Happiness for Beginners. What do you guys want to do?
Okay, well, let's jump into the book, and hopefully people have read it, or if they haven't, they will after this discussion, because it's really a wonderful story, just lovely, and I just enjoyed every minute of it. So I'll just start in with some questions, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So can you tell us specifically for this book, the inspiration behind the book and how you came to write it and how you came up with the title? And if you came up with the title or they came up with the title?
I did come up with the title, and I was very proud of it. And I called my mother, which is what I always do whenever I've come up with a title I think is good. She's my first stop. And she went, yeah, I don't like that one very much. And so then I thought about it and I was like, I think I still like it. So I stuck with it. The inspiration for the book is actually that I myself took a very similar hiking trip back in the day when I was 21, maybe, or 20. I was, and I myself had just been dumped horribly by a college boyfriend who I was very, very into, and he had cheated on me. And so I had a lot of rage, and I went to the wilderness and I stomped my way through the mountains with a lot of rage, which was good. I too, like Helen, am not a sporty person. I'm definitely not an outdoorsy person. Like, I would much rather be on the couch with a hot cup of tea reading about people doing outdoorsy things than actually doing outdoorsy things. But I did do that trip, and I was, much like Helen, trying to like change my entire personality when I went on that trip. I mean, I was trying very hard to become a person who liked doing stuff like that. And so I was very determined, to like, I was going to make the most of this. And I, like Helen, did not bring a book to read or any entertainment. I just had my little journal. And so I wound up writing in it all the time. And then I kept it. So when it was time to write this novel, I had a whole notebook full of stuff to work with. There was a very funny review that popped up on Goodreads a few years ago about this book. And it was some lady who said, my entire book club agrees. We all love this book, but this writer has never been hiking in her life. And I just thought it was so funny because I was like, okay, other than this one trip, that's pretty true, actually. But the one trip was actually, I mean, everything that happens in the story, almost everything. The people are fictional, but the stuff that happens is very much based on real stuff. We really had a guy who broke his hip that we had to carry out. You know, we really had a snowstorm in the middle of July. Pretty dramatic.
So I have a question for you. It sounds like you knew you wanted to be an author in 6th grade. But I'm kind of curious, did you know, or did any of the members of Duran Duran ever find out about your book?
They did not. I still feel like one of these days I'm going to meet them. I just feel like that's going to happen. I feel like it's kind of my destiny that one day I'll be, walking through an airport and there they'll all be, and we'll have coffee and bond and reminisce about all the fun we had together back in the 80s. But no, and another question I get about Duran Duran is, who did I choose? And I will tell you, it was Simon Le Bon. Although I was really open to a lot of suggestions at that time, but he was kind of my main guy.
That's funny. And also, I mean, if you really wanted Duran Duran to find out, we could all just get on our social media and tag them.
Yeah, I did a TED talk a couple of years ago, a TEDx talk in Bend, Oregon. And after it was over, and I talked about Duran Duran because I never, ever give a talk without somehow tying it to Duran Duran. And when it was over, this woman came up to me at the after party and she was like, what would you do if Duran Duran saw your TED talk and decided to come to Texas and surprise you? And at the time she was asking this question, I was like, oh, nonsense. That would never happen. But then the next morning, I'm having coffee with my husband and I'm like, okay, if they do show up, I'm going to dart out the back door. I got some unfinished business with these people. Make yourself scared. So
you'll have to let us know if that happens.
Any minute now, it could happen. We don't know. Yes.
Well, it's a good thing you're all dressed fancy just in case.
Always.
So I have a question about the process, because I'm just looking at my wall and I'm not a writer, but I'll make a speech or whatever and I'll make stickies. I'll put stickies all over my wall and just kind of grab them and put it together. So can you talk a little bit about your process?
Yes, it is very jumbled. It's a very jumbled process. It's a little bit different for every book. I basically get an idea for some situation that to me seems to have a lot of energy. And you really need a good situation for a story, because if you want a story to kind of light up from the inside and have a fire in its belly, that comes from the situation. And so, all the fun words in the world can't solve a story that doesn't have any energy. I often think about it like, that feeling when you try to take the wrong sides of magnets and squeeze them together. That's how you know when you've got a good idea, is when you've got sort of 2 or 3 different pieces, and when you try to squeeze them together, they push against each other. And there's that, whatever that is in there, that's what you want in a story. So that's the first step, is figuring out what those big pieces are going to be that have that kind of energy to them. And then once that's happening, then I kind of stew on it. I do research, I read a lot. I do a ton of research, generally speaking. And I'll collect 3 or 4 notebooks, fat college notebooks full of information about the jobs that people have and the stuff that's going on. And then while I'm doing that, I'm kind of, it's almost like a slow cooker, right? It's I've got all that information kind of the back of my head and it's kind of slowly burbling back in there. And then sometime in the fall, it's really time to start writing. Because usually I have a new book come out in the summer, I go on a book tour. And then when I'm done with that, I really buckle down on the next book, which needs to be turned in. I turn in a book every June. So I kind of have the whole fall and spring to write a book. And then in summer, and winter is in there too. and then in the summer, I'm kind of doing other stuff. So that's it's about an 8 to 9 to 10 month process. So then I start thinking about a 3-act structure, because the story really has to have a structure. You can't just ramble on and wander around. Like, everything needs to be in a story for a reason. Your scenes have to build and they have to relate to each other. I think a huge amount about structure, because structure does not come very easily to me. Dialogue comes easily to me. I could write dialogue in my sleep. I probably do. I never ever have to think about dialogue. I never have to try with dialogue. I hear it all the time in my head. I'm just watching.
I have to just jump in and say some of the things in the book struck me. Your banter is just phenomenal. I love the banter. I love it.
Thank you. Well, and I love to write banter, and I hear banter in my head all the time. Like, when I'm left alone, I will frequently just hear people saying funny things to each other in my head. And also, I'm married to a guy who is hilariously funny. He's just about the funniest person I've ever met. And I am funnier for being around him, but I'm also funny just on my own. And so the two of us together, like, that's our favorite thing. You know, we just get up in the morning and drink coffee and sit around joking about stuff. So banter is like the greatest joy in my life. I love to see other people do it. I love to generate it myself. That's all really easy, and it requires absolutely no effort. Structure requires a lot more effort. You know, I think of structure as kind of the roller coaster shape of the story that you're putting the narration on top of. Like, the words kind of go on top of that scaffolding, and figuring out what that scaffolding is and what it needs to be to give people the right emotional journey in a story that's the hard part for me. And I really take it very seriously, and I think about it a lot, and I read about it a lot, and I try different things in different orders. And that's a sort of a long process. I mean, for me, that's really the sort of the first draft, is figuring out what are we doing here? You know, like, what is the journey of this story, and trying to make it make sense. Because in a big way, writing fiction is kind of about taking the chaos of human life and arranging it into a shape that makes sense. So that's what I do. And then once I got the first draft down, it's easy. Everything's easy after that. I love editing. I love tinkering with things. I love counting syllables and seeing how to write things, you know, more tightly. I love playing with words, and, you know, I kind of go back and forth with my editor a little bit, and then we put it into production, and we're good.
So it just occurs to me, I have a question about, like, the characters and the storyline. Do you know the ending, or do you kind of make it up as you go along, or do you start knowing, well, I know that these two are going to get together at the end, or whatever?
It's both. It's a combination. I mean, with a love story, I always know that they're going to get together in the end. I mean, I would never, ever do that to you. This is my promise. This is my heartfelt promise. I am never, ever, ever going to make you root for two people to get together for 300 pages and then run one of them over with a bus. That will never happen. I've had it done to me in stories, and I've thrown those books across the room with great rage. So yeah, I'm not here to make you feel bad. I'm not here to depress you. I don't want to write a book that when you get to the end of it, you have to curl up in the fetal position and remind yourself of reasons to live. That's not why I'm here. And there's plenty of writers in the literary world who've got that down, right? That's taken care of over there. I'm over here trying to help us all feel hopeful, right? And I want us to feel encouraged, you know? I mean, I'm not still writing about Duran Duran, but on some very basic level, I'm still writing that same kind of story. I'm trying to encourage myself, right? And I'm trying to encourage everybody else. I'm looking for joy. I'm looking for hope. You know, I'm looking for meaning. I'm looking for wisdom. And I'm trying to write stories that when you get to the end of them, you feel better, right? You feel better about the human race and our potential to pull it together in some essential way. And I think that's actually harder than depressing people. You know, I think it's really easy to write depressing fiction. I mean, there's so much to work with in the world. But I'm trying to write stuff that's hopeful and joyful. And that's a little trickier because people are very suspicious about that. You know, they kind of immediately are like, that doesn't sound like real life. So you have to work extra hard.
So you told us a little bit about your personal experiences and how that, you know, helped you shape the book and the story. So Helen goes into the wilderness to become braver. Would you consider yourself a brave person? And what would you say is like one really brave moment in your life?
Ooh, wow, that's a great question. I am a weird combination of super brave and a total chicken. I'm both, I think. I'm a total quitter. I will avoid scary social situations like a champion. I don't always believe in myself, like it's very easy for me to think, oh, that's terrible. Like, oh, I wrote that, but it must be bad. So I don't suffer from overconfidence, that's for sure. But at the same time that all of that's going on in the surface, I also have this kind of dogged, kind of rock solid belief in myself deep down. So like, for example, I tried to quit writing fiction over and over and over and over and over for years, for decades, because I wasn't successful in the way I thought I needed to be successful to make it worth it. So I was like, you know what? This isn't healthy. I'm out. I quit. I'm done. Like, why would I do this? This is like masochistic. I'm not going to stay with this. I'm going to quit and get a normal job, where I can have some modicum of success. I'm not going to keep sending short stories to the New Yorker and getting rejected for the rest of my life. What am I thinking? And then I'd be like, I'm out. I quit. I'm done forever. And then like 2 weeks later, I would get an idea for a story and I would start up again. And it just felt like this tragic affliction that I had. Like everybody in my family felt so sorry for me. I was like the tragic ne'er-do-well because I could not kick this horrible habit of writing stories, but it wasn't getting me anywhere. Right. And so of course, now that I'm older and wiser, I'm so glad that I wasn't able to quit. I'm so glad that some little part of myself deep down inside was like, nope, we're sticking with this. Nope, we're going to keep doing this.
And we're glad too. and, and it sounds like you, like, obviously a lot of us, we are our biggest critics, but it sounds like you have a really great circle around you that kept encouraging you.
I do. I have a fantastic mom who has always been totally convinced that everything was going to work out. And I also have a really great, super supportive husband. So that's good. And I also will say that I think if you want to do a creative thing, whether you want to be a dancer or an actor or a painter, whatever it is, anything that you might want to do in your life that's audience based, it's really, really crucial to learn the art of self-encouragement. Because there's so many reasons to not do creative things. And there's so many elements of that life that will tear you down, right? And make you doubt yourself. And so you have to learn to recognize when something's not working that you're trying to do, but you also have to learn to like celebrate when something you're trying to do is working, And I think in life, it's very easy to sort of master the self-criticism, or at least for me, it was. What's been a harder thing to learn to do, but also much more fun, is learning how to like notice when I write some piece of dialogue that's really funny, right? Or when I have some description that's really just spot on and captures the moment. Or when a story's just working, when it's just building and working. I've had to teach myself how to like enjoy that and appreciate that. So I think that's another part of it too. And that's something you can do for yourself. And maybe it's not just for creative people, maybe it's for all of us. I mean, I think the art of self-encouragement is pretty useful tool.
You're muted, Lisa.
Oh, there we go. We have a question from another Katherine in the audience, and she wants to know, which authors do you enjoy reading?
Oh my gosh. How much time do we have? The first two people who jumped into my head are people I discovered during the pandemic. So these are newer writers to me. I discovered Emily Henry, who wrote a book called Beach Read that was like everywhere a couple of years ago. And she's a lot like me in that her books are they're very heartfelt, but they're also very funny. And she does great dialogue. And I read the first one of hers that I read, I just totally fell in love with it. I I took it into the bathtub and I stayed there all day. I mean, I just didn't get out until I finished. It was just yummy. I inhaled it. So I've totally fallen in love with Emily Henry. And I also discovered Christina Lauren. And Christina Lauren is actually two friends who write together, and their names are Christina and Lauren. Lauren and I bonded over the internet because we both really, really love to watch Korean television. Because Korea has an unbelievably awesome romance game going in their TV shows. And so we are both super hooked on them and love to watch romantic Korean TV. And so we've become buddies just over that, just texting each other back and forth about shows that we're watching and stuff. But then, from meeting her that way, I then started reading all her books, and I was like, well, obviously we were destined to be friends because her books are fantastic. So I definitely recommend those folks. If you like what I do, I think you would also like Christina Lauren and Emily Henry, because we all have a kind of similar sensibility.
Thank you. So this one is a question that I feel like is very relatable, because I'm currently dating, and I feel like I kind of relate to Helen, even though I wasn't divorced. But there's a 10-year gap between Helen and Jake. And Grandma Gigi says, that doesn't matter. Do you think that it matters? And why the 10-year gap? And why wasn't it like a 5-year gap or something smaller?
I don't think it matters personally. But I've been astonished at the number of people on the internet who have felt that it mattered and who really kind of struggled with this idea. But for me, I just think when you find somebody that you click with, who gets you and who, appreciates you and who enjoys you, like, I don't think there's too much really that matters besides that. So for me, it felt like, one of the things you're always kind of looking for if you're writing a love story, or at least this was something I was thinking about a lot when I was writing Happiness for Beginners, is that a love story is really kind of only as good as the obstacle in the love story. Like, you really, really need people who want to be together, who can't be together, or people who don't want to be together, who get pushed together. And that's the magnet thing that I was talking about earlier, right? That's what that is. It's that you're pushing them together, but they don't want to be together. And it makes that magnet feeling, that energy. That's what brings the story to life, right? So in this story, I was trying to have reasons for her not to want to be with him. And so the idea of her being a bit older came to me pretty early on, and I thought, well, that's something that could cause her to disregard him, right? Or just kind of poo-poo him or not take him seriously, because so that seemed like a good obstacle to me, an obstacle that was good, but not insurmountable. Although apparently for some people in the world, it is kind of insurmountable. But yeah, for me, it seemed like it was there, but not a deal breaker, just a factor that would impact how they related to each other.
Great. I just want to congratulate you, first of all, or second of all, or third of all, on the Netflix movie coming out. Super exciting. Is there a release date?
Not yet. Netflix gets to decide. It's a Netflix original. They have already, do you want me to talk about it? Is that where?
Yeah, that was my segue into want to talk about the movie.
Yeah. Okay. So they filmed it this fall in Connecticut, because that worked better for everybody working on the movie. So it's not filmed in Wyoming, like the book is, but everything's already been done. They filmed it. It took like a month for them to film it. And they very kindly let me come up and do a little cameo in the movie. So if you watch it when it comes out sometime in the next year, there's a flashback wedding scene of Helen's wedding. And I will tell you, if you've read the book, you know that Helen and Jake first met each other at Helen's wedding when Jake was 16 and Helen was 26, and she was getting married to someone else. And the first time Jake ever saw her, the first time he ever laid eyes on her, she was in a full wedding gown kind of getup, and he instantly like fell madly in love with her in that moment. And of course, he was a 16-year-old kid, and she did not care. So the book Happiness for Beginners, it happens many years later, right? When that whole marriage has fallen apart, she's in the process of getting divorced. And she winds up going on a hiking trip with Jake, that same guy. And if you are, if you like Helen and Jake and you want some more of Helen and Jake, you can actually go on my website. There's a short story called The Guy at the Wedding. And that is actually the story of the night that Helen and Jake first met. And I love this story. And so the woman who is the screenwriter, director of the Happiness for Beginners movie, she read that story. And then she put a flashback in the movie that relates to that's set at that wedding. And it's not showing the same stuff that goes on in the story. You're just getting a very short little flashback. But I got to go and be a guest at the wedding, at Helen's wedding. So I got to meet Ellie Kemper, who is absolutely lovely. She gave me a hug, and she was just really fun to talk to. And I got to meet Blythe Danner. Blythe Danner plays Grandma Gigi. Blythe Danner is Gwyneth Paltrow's mom and a very beloved actress. And I've always loved Blythe Danner since I was like little. So it was super exciting for me to get to meet her. We actually had lunch together. She also gave me a hug. These were very exciting moments. And so I got to stand in the background during the wedding and drink pretend champagne with Blythe Danner for like a whole day, which was pretty great. I will also say I got to meet Luke Grimes, who's the guy playing he's playing Jake. And Luke Grimes is in a TV show called Yellowstone. So I don't know if you guys have seen it, but he plays Kevin Costner's son in that show. And he is kind of this smoking hot cowboy, right? And so that was fun to get to meet him very briefly. But he didn't really do very much in the scene. The other actor that I got to meet was the guy that they've cast to be Helen's little brother, Duncan. And he had a lot to do in the scene. So I got to see him doing a lot of acting. And I will say, like, I found everybody in that scene super, super charming. It was so funny. And this is the thing that I came away with from standing there that day watching the scene, is that they did multiple takes of multiple different parts of the scene as they were going along. And I laughed at every single take. Every single take was funny. And they were doing the same stuff over and over again. So it shouldn't have been funny, but they would just tweak it in different ways each time. And I would like double over with laughter. So I think this movie is really going to be fun. You know, I think it's going to be fun to see everybody together. And I think they are going to be genuinely very funny. So I'm really excited.
I think that we're going to try to plan watch parties.
Oh, that would be fun.
So if you're in town, come watch.
I would love to. You know, when The Lost Husband came out in April of 2020, that was the month when they were closing down all the movie theaters. So, you know, we had this big plan to go to LA and do a premiere. I mean, it was going to be in theaters all over the country. It was going to be by far the most glamorous thing that's ever happened to me. I was already panicking about what I was going to wear on the red carpet. And then, you know, and then everything shut down and nothing happened, and it got released, you know, online. It was kind of at the scariest early part of the pandemic. I just wound up watching it like in my house with my husband and kids and dog, and like being on the phone, you know, with various family members at various times. But it was quiet. It was a very quiet kind of virtual release. So, you know, assuming that all is well with the health of the world, when this one comes out, I'm ready to get out there and like really celebrate, you know, I think that'll be great.
So we have one last question. You are currently working on your 10th book. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Or is it a secret?
I can. I'm about halfway done. It's a really, really interesting story. It's about a woman, the main character, who is a portrait artist. And she paints all these pretty faces. And all kinds of, she's kind of like a 21st century Norman Rockwell type of person. And she, I'm so sorry, I have a family group chat where everybody starts, like once one text comes in, everybody starts texting, and then 5,000 texts come in. So I'm turning off my phone desperately. Okay, so that won't happen. So it's about a woman who is a portrait artist, and that's how she makes her living, but she's been struggling, and she's just on the verge of getting her big break when she gets a brain injury and has to have brain surgery. And in the wake of the brain surgery, she has a thing called face blindness. And face blindness is basically a thing where you can see everything except for faces. And there's actually a couple different kinds of face blindness, but the kind she has is where it looks sort of like all the different, she can see the eyes and she can see the nose and she can see the mouth, but she can't quite put them together into a face that she can recognize. So she doesn't really recognize people. And there she is, trying to do some painting and of faces, and it's not working the way it used to. And so she has to kind of figure this out. And there's, of course, as always, a super fun, totally bananas love story that happens in the process of all this stuff going on. But I don't want to say too much about that because there's a big twist in the story. This is the biggest twist I've ever tried to write before. So I don't even know how to talk about it because I don't want to give anything away. But can I also just very quickly say that this book, which is my 9th novel, is coming out this summer, and it is so yummy. And it's set in Texas on a ranch. It's actually set on my own grandparents' Texas ranch outside of Houston, near Sealy, if y'all know where Sealy is, off the Brazos River, right off of I-10. And that is the ranch that I grew up scampering around on. And this story takes place out there. It's a story about a lady bodyguard who is hired to protect a really, really famous actor who's home in Texas to take care of his mom, who's ill. And it's just totally yummy. He doesn't want his parents to know that he's got a bodyguard, so he makes her pretend to be his girlfriend. So there's this kind of fun little fake relationship that's going on, and there's cows, and there's the Brazos River, and it's just, it was the book I was writing during the pandemic, and it was like how I made my own sunshine during the pandemic. And usually my books have like kind of sorrow, like a good chunk of sorrow and a good chunk of sunshine, and I try to find a balance. But in this book, it was just like as much sunshine as possible. I was like, I just want banter and cuteness and kissing and yumminess. So that's,
you know what, like truly, like these days you can never have too much sunshine.
I agree. I'm right there.
Right. And I just before I like pull it into close, I just want to tell you my favorite line in the book, Happiness for Beginners, and I even wrote it down, and I'm going to put it on my wall because I love it so much. It's so short, but the banter was great. It's talked in scribbles. I thought that was like just brilliant, just so brilliant. I love it's going on my wall.
Thank you. I feel very honored to hear that. Thank you for noticing that tiny little detail. Thank you.
Oh, I loved it. I love that. I just the even the smallest little bantery, thing just kind of catches me. Anyway, I'll just to wrap it up and Kathrine, on behalf of Trina, myself, and all of the Barbara Bush ladies, I want to thank you so much for coming and talking to us tonight about your life and your process and your fabulous novels, including, of course, Happiness for Beginners. Your characters are, like you, warm, relatable, and so very real. And I'm sure all of you listening here tonight will agree that this has been such a wonderful evening. And I know that I'm speaking for all of us when I say that we cannot wait for your next book and for that Netflix movie, who, by the way, you look a little bit like Ellie Kemper to me.
Thank you. I got my picture taken with Ellie Kemper while I was on the set, and she's a lot taller than I am, and yeah, I was like, wow, I'm a lot shorter than I thought I was.
Yeah, but you can still be twins. It's okay. It's okay.
Oh, well, she's lovely. I'll take it. I'm happy to be here.
Well, Katherine, anyway, thank you so much for your time and your energy. And I hope that everyone listening tonight has a lovely rest of their evening. Thanks for joining us.
Really quick before everyone leaves, if you want to come on camera, we're going to take a quick group photo. It is tradition. And also I am dropping the link to Katherine's newsletter.
Yes.
You can be sure to sign up for that and stay tuned for all the updates, release dates, and all of that. So if you've got your book, hold it up and I will count us down. 3, 2, 1. Awesome. One more for good measure. 3, 2, 1. Awesome. Thank y'all so much. And if you can stay on, I was going to pass it to Ashley to tease some upcoming foundation events. But again, thank you so much, Katherine, and be sure to sign up for her newsletter and stay tuned for our next book club.
Thank you, Katherine.
Guys.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. So if you're not already a member of the Ladies Guild, we're going to drop the link in the chat for membership. So please join us. We would love to have you. The Guild is also hosting for the month of March, which is National Read Aloud Month, a book drive, and we're having an event this Saturday at the Town and Country Barnes and Noble. So stop by and pick a book up and donate it to the Curiosity Cruiser. We will not be having an author talk for April, but instead we urge you to tune in to the broadcast of a celebration of reading on Channel 2, April 30th at 7 p.m. And our next author chat will be May 25th with more information to follow on that. So thank you guys so much for spending part of your evening with us.
Yes. Thank you again,
Thank you.
Katherine.
Wonderful.
Bye, guys.